Hey guys, and welcome back to the Finance Now podcast. This podcast is purely for informational and educational purposes, and it's my way of sharing my knowledge, research, and opinions with you. I'm Anurag Birla, and starting off this week with the usual macro debrief. So a big focus this week was on the labor market, right? We saw JOLTS job openings, the May reading, come in higher than expected at 7.769 million versus what was expected to be 7.32 million. The ADP nonfarm employment change for June, that was a big surprise downwards. Actually, we saw the number come in at negative 33,000 versus an expected positive 99,000. And, initial jobless claims coming in slightly below expectation, and continuing jobless claims coming in right around what was expected. And, the big surprise, I think, of the week was the unemployment rate, which came in at 4.1%, lower than the previous reading of 4.2% and the expectation of 4.3%. So that was a surprise in the positive direction, showing that the unemployment rate is not deteriorating as badly as maybe people would have thought. Non-farm payrolls came in actually much higher than expected, so 147,000 versus what was expected to be 111,000. So I guess all in all, like, what this data indicates is that there is no case really for a rate cut in July, right? The labor market is stronger than the street expected, and to take premature risks before trade deals and tariff deals are sorted is, in my opinion, unnecessary. And I think the Fed Chair Powell, who I believe has done a great job, he believes the same. So, the street did seem to expect 2 rate cuts this year. I'm still not convinced. I think at best we maybe get 1, if at all, right? If Trump is able to pull off the trade deals, lead the U.S. markets to all-time highs, all while avoiding a recession, inflation, and a weak labor market, then, truly we have seen something spectacular, and credit is to be given in that case. But I just cannot see a corporate America where companies are eating the increase in costs fully, Even if they do decide to do that, it's going to affect margins, right? Which should reduce the cash flow, and then when you discount lower cash flows, it should lead to a lower present value and lower valuations. Now, Besant seems to think that it's going to be the suppliers that eat the cost of the tariff, in the sense that they're going to have a negotiation with the buyers, and the price is going to be negotiated downwards so that the buyers can maintain whatever margin they initially had, and the U.S. consumers are not going to face inflation. While it's a possibility, I find this just a little hard to believe. But I guess we just have to wait and see how the implications of tariffs unfold, and ultimately who will eat the cost, because someone has to, right? There is a cost that needs to be paid, and someone has to pay it. So I guess this is just to reinforce my thesis about the second half of the year maybe not being as upbeat and rosy as the last 2 months. And perhaps we're going to see an increase in volatility, especially as we approach July 9th, which was the initial deadline day for trade deals, and the extension of the pause for the Liberation Day tariffs. This week, we also saw the U.S.-Vietnam trade deal happen. I'm not going to get into the terms, as it's available everywhere online, and there are plenty of deals that are yet to be made. India have yet to agree on a deal. Europe is yet to agree on a deal. And maybe that will come before July 9th, maybe not. But it's probably best to cover some of these key deals at a time where we have more oversight as to what the full complete picture looks like. And the last macro update, I guess, would be the big beautiful bill passing by Congress and ultimately being signed by President Trump, after which, the bill now takes effect as law. So there is a major shift here in favor of defense and border security spend. Non-defense contracts likely going to have less funding, which could lead to increased competition in those areas and consolidation. We see, some key points. Clean energy tax credits are being phased out. The debt cap is being raised by 5 trillion, which is ultimately going to allow the government to borrow even more. And of course, the expected increase in debt by economists, projected by economists, by 3.8 trillion over the next 10 years. So these are some key elements of that bill. We see that Musk is not happy at all, right? He's officially launched his America Party. So we're going to see how the whole Trump and Musk dynamic unfolds, and I just don't think it's a good look for Elon to be dipping his toes too much into politics. The damage has already been done to the brand of Tesla, and I think this is not going to do it any service, and perhaps just going to make it worse when it's trading at already incredibly lofty valuations. So moving on, we are pretty much at the end of earnings season. None of interest in the last week for me. So one of the things I wanted to do this week was to take the chance to focus a little more on an industry that has been somewhat catching waves this year and is definitely seen as a disruptor technology, and one that I find very interesting. And this is the eVTOL industry. So eVTOL stands for electric vertical takeoff and landing. Essentially, what these vehicles are is they're a new class of aircrafts which are designed to take off, hover, and land vertically, similar to the way we see helicopters, but these are powered by electric propulsion systems instead of, using the traditional fossil fuels. To simplify this, these are essentially air taxis or flying taxis, right? What we were promised back in the day through movies like Back to the Future and sci-fi movies. So the purpose of these vehicles are that they're designed to operate in urban environments, operate on a short range, on-demand air transportation, ultimately with the goal of reducing travel times and providing an alternative to ground-based transport. If you see a photo of how these vehicles look, they kind of look like helicopters, but with more propellers. So they look less like cars, more like helicopters, but they're air taxis. So I guess a question that, many people might have, and at least one I had initially, was how are these actually different to helicopters, right? Of course, the electric part of things, right? These have electric propulsion. So they use electric motors, which are powered by high capacity batteries. And what this does is that it makes these vehicles quieter than helicopters and more environmentally friendly than helicopters. These are supposedly meant to have lower maintenance costs because of simpler systems and fewer moving parts, but obviously for costs to come down, ultimately there has to be an increase in adoption, right? And they're obviously meant to be cheaper, but the same point there, before something gets cheaper, it has to reach a certain scale. Of course, I think even from a design perspective, helicopters have one large rotor and one tail rotor, which is smaller, right? These vehicles have multiple smaller rotors, ensuring that they can keep flying in the case that one of them maybe fails. And, if we think about why this technology and how this technological leap has come about now, and why didn't it happen earlier, it's predominantly because of the progress we've seen in battery technology. Energy density has increased, which is essentially how much energy batteries can store, and that has been a big contributor to the growth of this very nascent industry. And we've also seen with batteries that now the batteries can have faster charging and a longer life, which makes more sense if you want to take trips, right? You don't want batteries running out in a real quick time. Despite that, these are obviously for shorter duration trips, or air cab rides, as some may like to call it. So who are the key players in this industry? We have the likes of Archer Aviation and JOBY Aviation, which are two American players. We have Eve Air Mobility, which is a Brazilian player. We have Volocopter, which is German, Vertical Aerospace, which is British, and Ehang Holdings, which is Chinese. Obviously, these are just a few names that have popped up in the news or that I've been following for a bit of time. And the reason I find this industry of interest right now is because 2025 has been a pivotal point for this industry. We've seen real commercial deals, we've seen global test flights, and government partnerships that are actually moving eVTOLs from just being a cool concept and a technological disruptor concept to becoming a reality. And if we look globally, the Middle East and Brazil are really leading the charge in early adoption. US and Europe are obviously close behind, but it's great to see the Middle East really leading the charge here, right? So looking at the industry globally, in Dubai, both American and European eVTOL companies have actually completed successful test flights in Dubai, and this has come with government support and exclusive contracts for air taxi services. The first operational hub is actually planned near Dubai International Airport, with additional hubs in Palm Jumeirah, downtown Dubai, and Dubai Marina. So commercial air taxis are expected to begin in 2026, with test flights attended by government and industry leaders. So we see this moving at a pace that may become a reality very, very soon. When we look at Abu Dhabi, which is also in the UAE, Archer Aviation, their midnight eVTOL completed its first test flight at the Al Bateen Executive Airport in July, so just this month, right? And this was a key step towards commercial deployment in the region. And we see that the UAE is actively building the infrastructure and regulatory support necessary for eVTOL operations as they aim to become a global leader in urban air mobility. Now, looking at Brazil, Eve Air Mobility's partnership with Revo, which is an established urban mobility company with an established helicopter network. And this partnership is essentially a test bed for eVTOL integration, right? And the commercial service they have planned is for 2027. Now, if we look at the US, JOBY Aviation has now completed over 1,000 test flights, and they're working closely with the FAA for certification, with the aim to launch passenger services by 2026. You can also see Archer Aviation conducting piloted flight tests with its midnight prototype, and the breaking piece of news that was earlier this year was Archer signed to be the official air taxi provider of the LA 28 Olympics, which was a big deal for the company, for the industry as a whole. Now, one of the big important questions is, what are the big hurdles that this industry faces? I mean, these stocks have been on a tear this year, right? So where can the bottlenecks occur? And I actually think regulatory challenges is by far the largest and single biggest bottleneck, right? Certification. Standards for such a new and revolutionary technology are just not yet established, and for these to come into play and to be somewhat similar globally, it's likely to be a very complicated process, and it's probably also going to lead to a slower rollout, right? More of a delay in different regions, because different regions maybe will have different regulations, and to establish these standards is going to take some time. The questions to be asked are more, how will this be integrated into urban planning? How will mapping or air traffic or airspace work? And at what height will these hover? Like, will they be a disruption to flights incoming and going out of cities? And these are all questions that kind of need to be hashed out in terms of the standards. Another hurdle that the industry faces is around infrastructure, and infrastructure has to catch up. It's a similar story to EVs, right? The technology preceded the infrastructure. We saw electric cars and good electric cars before we saw high adoption of charging stations and the infrastructure that helps power EVs to even go the distance. And I think we still see that bottleneck in the EV space, and it's not different for eVTOL, right? And perhaps there could be opportunities to look for companies that operate in the vertiports or charging infrastructure space for some of these vehicles. Additional to, I guess, in context of infrastructure, we also see a power grid strain. we need alternative energy sources and sustainable energy sources to ensure that the adoption can continue at a sustainable rate. Battery technology has to continue to improve as well, which it is doing, and I think this will more just be a matter of time. A third bottleneck that I'm thinking of is cost. This is another hurdle. The technology is new, and typically what we see is when such new and costly technologies that have cost a lot to develop, when they're launched, initially they're always priced as a luxury. And of course, this cost would come down over time as manufacturing scales, as adoption scales, but that may take a while, and these companies need to be okay to sustain on such a large deficit or such a large loss before they start to really monetize. And the fourth hurdle that I see is public trust and acceptance. For most of us, this seemed like a sci-fi fantasy, right? And now it's finally becoming a reality. The logistics of how this is going to work, as I mentioned, is complex, and whether humans will very comfortably accept and adopt such a change in travel is yet to be seen. And at what pace they do so is also a question that has to be asked. I think it'll happen for sure, but there may be a gap in expectation versus reality here. Overall, it's a very cool space. It's a cool industry, and definitely one to watch as a potentially high growth industry as, these rollouts happen and adoption scales. Now, the final piece of news I wanted to talk about this week is the S1 filing and upcoming IPO of Figma. So what do Figma do? They are a cloud-based design platform that lets teams create, edit, and collaborate on digital designs in real time directly in the browser. So the app is widely used for designing user interfaces, websites, mobile apps, prototypes, and because everything happens online, multiple team members can work together pretty seamlessly, no software installations needed, and everyone always sees the latest up-to-date version. Now, their unique propositions, or what separates them, is that real-time cloud-based collaboration, right? It's their most defining feature and what people may call their moat. It allows people, no matter where they are, to work together seamlessly in a team, which is crucial in today's remote and hybrid work environments, especially for more creative roles that involve design. They tend to be more hybrid, and this just serves as a major solve for that problem where someone may not see an update that you have added, or it may take time for that to reflect. Figma also have, in many ways, a technical moat, right? Their high-performance web front end is an amazing engineering accomplishment, and it enables complex design tasks in the browser with speed and reliability that clearly competitors have struggled to match. Now, for many companies, Figma isn't just a tool that they use for design, right? It's their entire digital workspace where they design product and engineering a line, reducing any sort of workflow friction, and it speeds up product cycles. I think another question that's important to ask is, how are Figma using AI? For any tech service business in today's world, that has to be a question we ask. And we can see that their adoption has increased incredibly well. They have something called Figma Make, which is essentially a tool that users can describe what they want. They can say that, hey, I want, I guess a login screen with 2 buttons, and the AI instantly generates interactive prototypes or even deployable apps, without any coding skills needed. And you can also mix in existing designs with simple text prompts, and it's basically a prompt engineer for designers to kind of say what they want, what they're visualizing, and Figma's AI system makes it happen. Figma's AI can also generate interaction code from plain language, right? It can automate the creation of responsive layouts, and it can also help with custom code edits. So this really helps to bridge that gap between design and development, which speeds up that handoff process. Another thing that I found very interesting about their AI as I was reading a bit more about the company is that Figma's AI learns your style over time. And this ends up becoming way more important to you the more you use it, right? Because it starts to act like a personal assistant designer that helps you maintain your consistency and speed and style and aesthetic, which is extremely valuable in terms of speeding up workflow. And when you're working at a specific company, every company has a certain brand. So for the AI to kind of learn and understand your style, it's almost operating as a second employee that can assist you. And another way that they're leveraging AI is through Figma sites, right? And this is them letting users turn designs into fully responsive websites. And AI handles a lot of that heavy lifting on layout and content management. And Figma Buzz is another thing that I really liked, which is their way of using AI to help with marketing and brand teams generate, consistent visual assets at a good scale. So who are the competitors? Well, the obvious ones are the likes of Adobe and Canva, right? These are two of their most notable competitors. And if you look back in time a bit, in 2022, Adobe was actually going to acquire Figma for $20 billion. And this deal was intended to strengthen Adobe's position and leadership in the design software space. But ultimately, this deal fell through because regulators thought that this is going to harm competition, and subsequently the deal was abandoned, for which Adobe had to pay a breakup fee of $1 billion US. Now that offer was for $20 billion. Figma's most recent private valuation was $12.5 billion, and now they're looking to raise $1.5 billion through the IPO. So analysts expect that the public valuation could actually reach anywhere between 17 to 25 billion, depending on demand. And if you look at why Figma are looking to raise, well, the logic makes sense. It's just a natural next step for the company. They're looking to expand globally, right? Scale its sales, infrastructure, and support teams internationally as it grows its customer base beyond the core regions. They are looking to invest more in new AI-driven features, expand their product suite. They have Figma Make, Sites, and Buzz, and they want to maintain that innovation lead that they've slowly become known for. They want to also use some of the money to pursue larger scale enterprise and US federal government deals, especially after achieving that FedRAMP moderate certification. Some of the proceeds will also go towards paying down debt and strengthening their balance sheet. And they also want to have the flexibility for any strategic acquisitions that can maybe accelerate growth or expand capabilities. Now, Figma's IPO got me thinking a lot about what the future of Adobe looks like. And, based on what I've come to understand, Figma has taken a lot of market share, right? Customer base and revenue have grown rapidly, and they've gradually become the top product design tool and the preferred product design tool. They have truly and successfully been a disruptor, and their entire cloud native and collaborative approach is what has truly separated them, right? So my thoughts around this are, it's hard to see Figma slowing down, especially as online advertising continues to grow, media content consumption continues to grow, screen time continues to increase. UI, UX experience and design is only going to become increasingly important. It's already extremely important, and I think that's just going to increase as time goes on. And Figma are strong leaders in helping build that out successfully on an enterprise level. Also looking at the IPO market, we saw Circle and CoreWeave this year have very successful IPO debuts, as well as Chime Financial, which actually soared 59% on the first day of trading. Yes, it's down a bit since then, but that first day was extremely successful for Chime. Perhaps Figma could warrant strong demand once listed as well. In the current context of how IPOs have done, or how tech-centered IPOs have done, it seems like a high probability bet. But I guess I would tread with caution And as I wrap up today's episode, I do want to remind everyone that anything I say is not formal investment advice, right? It's purely my opinion and is entirely for informational and educational purposes only. So please obviously do your own research before you make any investment decisions. With that, I thank you for listening. I'm Anurag Birla, and this is the Finance Now Podcast.